So, books became my best friends. There was an old couple who lived upstairs. I called him Uncle Saul. Uncle Saul gave me an old raincoat that was 4.5 sizes too big. It was huge. It dragged on the floor when I wore it. It was perfect for shoplifting books. If I saw a remotely interesting cover of a magazine or paperback, it went right down the left sleeve. Every day I would go out and steal books, magazines. If it had an interesting looking cover, I nabbed it. Soon I had amassed a collection of paperbacks, hardcover books, girly magazines, comic books. It was across the board. It was everything from Babar the Elephant to Lusting Babes. There were these little pamphlets that were done up like Lily St. Cyr style, black and white print. The letters were cut into white into a black background, so it just burst out at you. Titles like Souls in Pawn. There would be girls dancing and chicks starting to lift their tops. I was onto everything. And Uncle Saul discovered my stash in the basement. I had accrued a huge stash. It was half the size of a Volkswagen. It was piled up, and I hid it under whatever debris I could find. But he discovered it. Knowing he had me over a barrel in terms of my parents finding out, I was forced to strike a deal with him. That was he would not rat me out as long as he could borrow the girly magazines. Anyway, on my 7th birthday, by then we had gone to Brookline, Massachusetts. Anyway, on my 7th birthday, by then we'd gone to Brookline, Massachusetts. I remember my pop being admonished by my mom to go see Robin Hood, the Walt Disney version. I remember driving right past it and my pop said, it's such a long line, let's go see another show. I said, what show is that? He said, have you ever heard of Marilyn Monroe? I said, no, I haven't. What's the movie about? He said, don't worry about that. It's called Some Like It Hot. I'll tell you the story of Robin Hood. So that I could tell my mom later. We sat through Some Like It Hot 2.5 times and got home just in time for dinner. It was pretty evident that we hadn't gone to see Robin Hood, but right then I determined that I was not only going to be Hercules, but I was also going to be Marilyn Monroe. I also decided that I was going to make movies, because I knew who Cecil B. DeMille was, and I had a real good idea of how movies were made. Which I've come to do in video form. They're little movies. I wrote and directed, edited, cast, and color corrected California Girls, Just a Gigolo, Hot for Teacher, and Jump, among others. California Girls and Just a Gigolo are the Wizard of Oz of pop video, and a dozen years later, they're still very, very popular. There are hardly any videos by any other artist you can name made, say, from 10 years ago that are still popular today. Go ahead, try to name some. You can't. Brookline, Massachusetts was very racist. It was not unusual to see swastikas painted on the front door of the Jewish temple. I became Jewish in a militant sense. But not so much in a church-going sense. That only added fuel to the fire, insofar as a Dave Against the World sense. That was my door. It was not a happy time for me, because that's when you have to start going to Sunday school, Hebrew school, confirmation class. But I did learn to sing. I am waterproof. Nothing drowns me out. I had a starring role. I belonged. I had the attention. I could do no wrong. I had a pretty little falsetto voice before all the hormones kicked in, and it made my grandma cry with alarming regularity. For the right reasons. Now I sound like 4 flat tires on a muddy road. But I could sing sweetly then, and there wasn't a thing I couldn't sing. This would have been 1961, when 2 magazines became hyper-relevant to my development, Mad and Playboy. Mad's publisher, William M. Gaines, was the first one to start pointing the finger sarcastically in comic format at that time. What I learned from Mad was to find falsehood, or recognize it, to find facade or pretension wherever it exists and crucify it. Just like all the Marx Brothers taking on old Margaret Dumont, it was Ray Bolger, the Scarecrow from Wizard of Oz, taking on the Wicked Witch. Mad was a very healthy balancing factor in my life. For me, comedies always address perception and reality way better than drama. The other magazine was absolutely pivotal in my development spiritually, was Playboy. All you had to do was look at a picture. There's that guy Andy Warhol, standing next to that guy Cassius Clay, next to that guy Picasso, standing next to that guy Hemingway, standing next to that guy Carl Sandburg, standing next to that guy, that professor from Harvard who was taking the drugs, and so on. And those girls, they were part of the crew too. Oh man, I was going to join that. You better believe it. I was going to do everything that was on that page. Show people. I use that term because it reminds me of burlesque and vaudeville. Show people is the little lady who takes the ticket and the old guy who sweeps up. The one with the white light bulb on the pole on the stage after everybody's gone home. Show people as singers and dancers. Show people as the guy who paints the advertisement or the photographer. You know what I'm saying? These were all show people. I don't know any other way to get into that magazine except to be show people. I couldn't paint, I couldn't write. Playboy is so important to me. Most people would never get past looking at the finger pointing to the moon. They just crack it open, they see tits and ass, the joke page, the fold out. That's as far as they ever got. They got as far as the tip of the finger. If you looked further, where Hugh Hefner was pointing, it was the universe. Here was the map. Full-blown color and everything. He had an editorial opinion on everything in a day and age when opinions were somewhat frowned upon. Opinions caused dissension. Opinions caused political foment. I still read Playboy, looking for that same seed, and much of it is there. There was a very high grading curve for those magazines at the time. Perhaps the descendants of Mad magazine were National Lampoon and Spy. Both very alternative, but cut from the same stone. I remember opening a Playboy magazine and seeing a Miles Davis interview, 1961 or 62. You didn't see black people in white magazines a whole lot, unless it was Aunt Jemima on the cover of a pancake box. Lenny Bruce was up and coming at the time, and making big-time waves. Nobody had ever seen a routine like that. Nobody had ever heard of such a thing. And it wasn't just pure comedy. It was reportage. It was social critique, social commentary. It was very left of center. It went hand in hand with the Mad magazine and the Playboy magazine kind of ethic. He was at the height of his powers then, even though he's already legendary, speeded out of his brain. He made some incredible waves in what we perceived in our culture, in what we perceived as a sense of humor. He was at that party at Playboy magazine as well. They called what he did sick humor. Now he'd be a national affairs editor at Rolling Stone. Back then, we crucified him and ultimately killed him, or at least provided a route for him to kill himself. Put him out of business. In 1962, my Uncle Manny owned a club in Greenwich Village called the Café Wa. His wife, Aunt Judy, was the original Indian Madras lady. Judy never walked anywhere. She wafted. Manny was the oldest of the Roth brothers. He left Indiana and went to the village. It was the age of the coffee shop and the cafe. Manny had a flat over the famous Cafe Reggio, where Hippolyte Havel, the first freewheeling anarchist, held court in the 20s. I'd waft up and down McDougal and Bleecker Street with my Aunt Judy while Manny would tend to his business. It was Judy who scoped me to what New York City was all about. Pop was in school the first time I went to New York. I guess I was about 7 years old. We had flown down from Boston, and I was sitting in the backseat of a taxi looking out the window. It was 11:30 at night. I was still awake, and so was the rest of the entire world. It was right outside the window. It was even better than the magazines. We was freewheeling then. There's a famous Spanky and Our Gang episode where Buckwheat and Spanky are selling ice out of the back of a horse cart. There's a donkey and there's a stick with a carrot. Tire bursts in the car, and the donkey breaks free. The car starts careening down the hill at breakneck speed. Spanky turns to Buckwheat, "Hit the brakes!" Buckwheat turns to him and yells, "Brakes is gone, we's freewheelin'!" Which is the name of the episode, Freewheelin'. The first time I saw New York, I commenced freewheelin'. Brakes were gone. It was the first time I'd ever seen a magazine store where you needed a stick to get the magazine off the top rack because it was up so high. I'd never seen so much paperwork on one wall. This was heaven. I only really knew 2 magazines, and lo and behold, I stepped through a doorway and there were 500 new friends. It was right across the street from the Café Wa, where Manny was the Duke of McDougal. Manny coined the name by walking from couch to couch one night saying, "What should we name our new coffee house?" And somebody would say, "How about the ever-arcing spiral of transcendence?" And Manny would go, "What?" Like Grandma would. He'd walk to the next couch and say, "What do you think we should call our new coffee house?" The reply, "Call it the Electric Purple Soft Machine." Manny would go, "What?" So eventually, he just named it the Café Wa. And I took passage through all of those bars. The Cedar Tavern, the San Remo, whatever. Judy took me to all of these places. I got to see lots of fist fights. These painters and writers would get drunk and go at it. Great, I decided I was going to be a painter too. I knew how to throw a punch. It was a simple conceptual leap for me. So it was a great, great mix there. It was just like those magazines I was shoplifting. The whole village scenario taught me not to be afraid of anything with 2 legs and pants. Indeed, if it moves, I ain't scared of it. It's the stuff that doesn't move. There's a few mountains I won't go near again.